All right, Mark Sutcliffe of Trespass. Welcome to 69 Faces of Rock. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. It's very warm in the UK at the moment, 28 degrees, 30 degrees centigrade, so it's pretty warm for working in, but yeah, I've had a good day.
Hopefully in the dark old cellar.
Yeah,
Right.
my music, yeah, yeah, down in the music room.
Excellent. So your new album, Wolf at the Door, is
Yeah.
absolutely great. Tell me about the creation process for these songs.
It's quite interesting because probably the album would have come out in a different form sooner if it hadn't been for the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I kind of just got stuck into writing. And what happened was the set of songs I had kind of started to evolve, and some of them didn't make it, and some new ones came in. Um, so I did a lot of work on my own. Although ultimately, once we started to get back together with the band, and then we were able to play some of the songs together, and then that's when we decided. But I guess I tend to write about things that matter to me or have happened to me or things like that. So over that period of time, it was pretty traumatic. I went through a breakup as well as all the stresses of the pandemic and everything. But we got a good album out of it. Well, I think we did.
I mean, sometimes you have to write about what you know.
That's right. I mean, I don't I don't mind, writing. I mean, I like mythology. I love science fiction, fantasy, all that stuff. But I tend to kind of write about things that uh, you know they might hint in that direction, but there's what's relative to the real world, really, as much as I can.
Uh, Many performers claim when they do similar things, write about their own experiences, that it's almost like a therapy for them.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess I guess it is because you're getting it out of your system. You're writing it down, you're performing it. When you perform it, you sing those lyrics, and you think, and I guess also it's you know, harking back to the last album, it's a footprint in the rock because once it's out there, it's out there. It becomes a permanent thing, a piece of history.
I mean, you capture a special time.
Yeah, yeah. I think all our albums should do that. I think there's a definitely a case for an album, a bit of a snapshot at the time. I think it's and I guess I feel as though what we've ended up with is an album, a listen. If you sit down and listen to the whole thing, it's a bit of a complete kind of listen to sort of where I'm coming from at the moment. That might change as things evolve, but I mean, I'm already thinking about what to do next. But I listen to because I tend to listen to a lot of stuff in the car, and I don't listen to my stuff a lot. But I have last couple of days I've had a little listen to the album again, and yeah, I enjoyed it.
I've listened to it today, and I'm loving it. The album sounds incredibly well balanced. Did you have a plan in mind as you were putting it together?
I got a really good friend of mine he just loves rock music, and particularly the sort of 80s era. He's a little younger than me, and he is a real listener and a listener of albums. So he helped me put the track order together. It's quite difficult when you're working with your own material to imagine what it's like for somebody other than yourself to listen to it because you hear it in a different way to anyone else. And he helped me put the track listing together, the order. Um, so yeah, I tried to sort of think about what the sort of songs I wanted to do. I did kind of, there's a couple of longer pieces with perhaps some slightly different feels going on, bit of light and shade. which is important for any band. You know, so I feel like we managed to achieve that balance that you're talking about. Yeah,
I,
by by choosing the songs carefully. There were a few tracks that I only worked up to a certain level that in this session, if you like. I mean, it's one of the advantages of modern music that you've got things like Pro Tools where you can, if you get an idea, you can pretty quickly do a sketch of a song and you can tell, if it's going to really work or not. But I don't commit anything to a sort of final product until the band have been through it and see what people feel. And it's really great to have this particular lineup because the guys are really positive. If they really like something, they let me know. If they don't like it, they let me know as well.
and speaking of that, you have a fairly new lineup with you, but you sound so tight and clear as if you play with these guys for decades.
I think, well, Jason, the drummer, I've been working with Jason. Well, it must be getting on for 20 years now. I mean, it's just the time has just flown, But Will, the new bass player, he I've known Will for a long time, and he was I got to know him. He's just a little bit younger than me. Everyone's younger than me, I'm afraid. And yeah, Will's sort of tastes, and he's very much into the sort of stuff that we're doing, and he really takes an interest. Whether he'll join in with the writing on the next lot of stuff we do. I think he's got some ideas. We want to sort of broaden it out a little bit more. But yeah, it's great. It's great fun, and they're just great guys to be with as well. And when if you've got a long flight or a long drive, and it's good to have that camaraderie.
Yeah.
And to feel like everyone's kind of on the same page and pulling together. It's good.
Now, over the years, there were many band members that came and went. What does it take to be in Trespass?
That's a good question. I guess I can be. I mean, the thing about I'm passionate about original music and music as art as well, and I guess that makes me a little difficult sometimes because some people take a much more product orientated approach. What kind of song do people want? What we've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to look like this, we've got to, and I'm not so much like that. I'm very much, I bring it out of myself and then that's what you get. Because I mean, whereas probably in most of my life, I'm kind of a left wing kind of share it all out kind of guy. When it comes to my music, I'm afraid I'm a bit more narrow minded. And if anybody doesn't really get it, then I find them a little difficult to work with. They find me difficult to work with. Whereas these guys, I think they've just settled into sort of Joe, the other guitarist. He's much younger. He's I think he's about 36 now. He's the same age as my daughter, and he is really talented. He's from a blues background, but he understands when you've got really good musicians with you. You can just start playing something and they automatically they just know, they just feel it, and they start. And that's a wonderful thing when that happens.
You definitely have
Yeah,
that album. It feels like it. In your opinion, what are some of the key tracks on this new record?
oh, it's been really interesting to see what tracks, along with the reviews we've had and the interviews I've done, and looking at what's getting played on Spotify and things like that. I guess I mean I like the sort of singly type stuff, like the sort of more sort of short, punchy songs like Blackthorn and things like that. But I don't know. I like it all in different ways, and different people seem to like pick up on different tracks. I guess I do like Back to the Woods as purely as a piece of music. It didn't. I don't know. it came out a little lighter than I expected. I thought it might come across a bit heavier, but it's quite lightweight. And then the middle eights I like. Um, Ghost Pilot's one that's picking up a lot of people seem to like. When I first started to work on Ghost Pilot, I thought I'm not sure about this riff, you know, the intro riff. So I played it to a mate, and he said, "You've got to put that on." He said, "You've got to put that on the album." You know, although I thought the riff, I'm always looking for something original, and in heavy or hard rock, there's not a whole lot of space for originality. But what's important is the feel. A lot of the riffs are really quite similar, but it's how it makes you feel. That's what music is, you know.
I definitely agree.
Yeah, so I've tried to go with that because the other thing that I tend to do is write the lyrics first. I have a little bit of a background in poetry when I was at school and won a few prizes for. I remember one particular a poem I wrote about a storm, and I've still got somewhere that I won a prize for, and I like that kind of storytelling lyric. But and then also once I've got the lyric and I look at it, I try to convey that the feel of the lyric in the music as well, rather than do a riff that's a really good riff and then try and cram the vocals in or on the riff. I tend to work with the lyrics to bring the sound, the feel of it. It's quite important.
Yeah, my favorites kind of changed almost from listen to listen. Like right now, I'm gravitating towards Stranger in Paradise.
Yeah, Strangers. I thought myself, one of the things that's wonderful about the way you're able to write these days with technology, and also the record company gave me pretty much a free hand to write what I want and record what I want, and you know I've got the opportunity with my studio to record. It's still you still feel slightly constrained by convention, and you can do anything you want. You know what I mean? It's one of those weird things. You don't really let yourself go completely. With Stranger, I thought it's a story of how I went back to a house that I used to share with someone, yeah, and how I felt. That's basically what the story is. I won't tell you who the dragon is, but she, but but it, yeah, I just wanted to develop, and I just had this concept, and I wanted, and it seemed to grow, it seemed to develop into something. And there's a bit of Led Zeppelin there. There's a bit of, you know,
Yeah,
there's all sorts of bits in there. I really wanted to, and I've deliberately, you can probably hear it in there, but I'm unashamed of my influences. If I want a bit of Blackmore, I'll have a bit of Blackmore. You know, if I want a bit of Scott Gorham, I'll have a bit of Scott Gorham and a bit of Schenker and a bit of because that's where I come from.
I totally feel it because that's kind of where I come from as well. It wasn't just me who listened to all these bands, but my dad, who had me at age 20, he was in that music. So I grew up with Highway Star. I grew up with Rainbow. I grew.
Fantastic. Highway Star is just such a, especially the one on Made in Japan. The power in that, the energy, especially where Blackmore goes into the solo, that vroom he does on the guitar. I mean, on another night he wouldn't have pulled that off, but on that night, the power in it, I just love it. I love it. Me and my brother used to put that track on,
Fun,
turn off all the lights, and throw ourselves around the room. When we were kids.
funny you should say that because now I'm thinking about Force of Nature, which I think has a very nice touch of Stargazer.
Yes, it does. I mean, when I thought to myself, I'm not going to be ashamed of this. I mean, it is different enough for Richie Blackmore not to sue me, but it that album especially. I mean, Rainbow Rising just had such an influence on me and my playing and what can be achieved by rock music. You know, the majesty of it, the bigness of it, the theatre of it. That's I love all that. And then on the other side of the coin, I love Lizzie. Again, storytelling type songs. I really like. But yeah, Strangers, great. You know, we haven't played that one live yet. I guess we will at some point, but yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that.
All right. So I absolutely love the production of this new album. It sounds incredible, and the booklet indicates that it was you who produced the record as a band.
Yeah, with help from the engineer, John. Yeah, I guess what it. I suppose, and I really should have, after 40 years of playing the guitar and listening to rock music, I've got a pretty good idea what I think a rock band should sound like. So I kept it relatively raw. And I wanted it to be, although I've used a few more guitars here and there on the production side, that obviously we can't necessarily reproduce live, but all the classic albums have got that on. I mean, Purple, for instance, Blackmore used to double a lot of his solos and harmonize with them. It's just because a record is a record and live is live. And I think maybe the two have got a little bit, as the quality of PA systems has improved, people get a bit obsessed with trying to reproduce the album that they've recorded, even though it's a totally different medium. The recording studio is a completely different place from playing live, and songs have to be adjusted and tweaked to make it possible to play them live. You know, sometimes. But I mean, Blackmore's famously, I mean, very rarely played Stargazer live.
Mhm.
It's such a demanding track. You know, I saw them on the Long Live Rock and Roll tour. That's when I saw Blackmore for the first time. My God, he was loud. He was so loud. He liquefied us all. It was just amazing. But obviously Ronnie Dio and Bob Daisley and David Stone on the keyboards, wasn't it? They were, and Cozy Powell. I mean, they were just unbelievable.
Um,
You know,
I'm a big collector of like live recordings, and I think I have just about any early Rainbow performance recorded. And even from listening to them, like the way he approaches these songs, even from evening to evening, it changes.
yes, yes. I think yeah, I guess if you've got the freedom to do that, because no one was going to say to him, Richie, can you make sure you play the solo to such and such tonight? Because he'd just do the opposite of what you said, judging from what I've read about him. But live performance should, as much as, and like I say, the obsession with making it like the record has led to bands using backing tracks and backing vocals, and you start to lose and play into clicks, and I don't know, maybe you lose something there. But yeah, Richie very rarely plays. I mean, I've heard recordings from the other nights that they took for the album for Made in Japan, and they're good, but they're just not as good as those takes. You know, it's just one of those things.
There you
You
go.
know.
So it seems like with the release of the self-titled Trespass album back in 2015, you became a lot more consistent as a band. Could you say you got a little bit more serious again about things?
Yeah, I think so. I guess that was a situation where I wanted to do another original album then and write for it, but I couldn't get the other guys were all involved in different projects, and they just didn't want to get into that sort of situation again. And I understand that. So we decided to get some of the old Trespass classics and get them sort of a bit more unified, a bit more of an album sound, and perform them the way we wanted to. So it's the original lineup pretty much, different bass guitarists, but yeah, it was good fun, and I enjoy listening to that set of songs. And but then I still had this bug of wanting to do another original set of songs, and I can't stop myself writing. You know, it just happens.
A good thing.
And anyway, so I started to get some good songs together, and it was inevitable that we managed to get a deal for the album, so we just went ahead and did Footprints in the Rock. And that had Joe, the current guitarist, and Jason on drums, and a different bass guitarist. And then, like I say, there was a bit of a hiatus after that, it was
Oh,
fairly well received, I suppose. Footprints. It was you know, good and bad reviews, but it sort of got me back into the idea of writing for an album, and then although this one's taken a little bit longer to actually see the light of day, it's I'm pleased. I can hear things developing, things evolving.
um, with all this effort on your side, do you see more interest in the band developing?
Um, I hope so. I hope so because the opportunity to perform live, you know, I mean, people, I mean, you've got bands that are in their mid 70s going out now and playing to huge audiences, Deep Purple and bands like that. And they've got an incredible catalogue. We'll never have that kind of status, but I like to do some nice shows. I'm not crazy about massive touring or anything like that. I don't think that will happen for us. So it's very much about I've got some music to share. Here it is, and then if something comes from that, I'm one of the things about me again, I suppose, where I clashed sometimes. I hate the bullshit in the industry. There's a lot of foam and fluff about stuff, and I just want to say, right, here is the music. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, okay. But I just that's how I want it to be. I just want to do it on the music, you know.
Now, I was able to find a new album in American shops. Are you making plans for the US market, which, by the way, now is very receptive?
It does seem that well, I've done a couple of interviews with about other American guys, and it does seem like we've made a little bit of a reach into the States, I must admit. And I was married to an American girl for some time, so I kind of understand the culture a little bit. But I never got to play over there. I mean, I'd absolutely love to. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just you know that yeah, but I'm glad about that because I think maybe there's a few real diehard fans of Trespass and the new wave of British heavy metal over in the States. But it's nice to sort of reach out a little more, maybe, and get people to listen to the new stuff and then enjoy the old stuff as well. It actually, the live set that we've got at the moment, which is a real mix across the ages, as it were, really works well.
Um, what would you say is easier now than, let's say, it was back in 1981?
Oh, blimey. Communication is reaching out to your core audience is also possible in a way it wasn't before. It was kind of a little bit like, you know, all the bands held up a light. I'd be holding up a lighter and Deep Purple would be holding up a searchlight. So, do you know what I mean? So your light was there, but your chances are anyone looking from a distance it's like a planet orbiting a distant star. You're never going to see the planet because the star wipes you out, and it's a bit like that. But now I can shine out specifically to my group of followers, if you like, and I guess that's the main thing. It gives you because the thing is, record sales, these CD sales are so much smaller than they used to be. If you can target your audience, you know you've got a probably well. It sounds like I'm taking it for granted. I'm really not. I'm always. I tell you what, there was a really we did a Keep It True festival in Germany, and every time I went to do a song, a guy at the front held up the album that song came from, and it was really funny because he had them all there, you know, and he brought them to me afterwards to sign, and it was just wonderful, you know, it just really great. But I guess you know it's just trying to reach out to as many people as possible, and so they can have a listen to it. The listening, the getting involved in it. I'm hoping, yeah, that we will get a bigger reach from this album. I've got a feeling it has already done that, but you know, it's my dream to come to the play in the States.
I think you
You
should
know, I
make
remember
there are a
when
lot.
I mean, we sort of we didn't really know Iron Maiden back in the day. but obviously we were kind of a little bit later onto the scene than them. But they were just starting to really break when we started to play in London. They were doing 3 or 4 nights at the Marquee Club when we started to play at the Marquee, supporting other people. So they were ahead of us. But then when we did the Metal from Others thing, and they'd done Metal from Others 1 with 2 tracks, kind of headlining the album, and then we did 2 tracks on the second album, kind of headlining the album. And I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves there. We thought that EMI were going to sign us, and they made all the right noises. For one reason or another, it just didn't happen.
Tell me about the beginnings of Trespass back in '79.
Right. Well, what happened was my brother and I started sort of playing together, I guess 77, 78. I think my brother got a drum kit quite late on. But he was such a natural. The first studio session we did in October 79, he'd only had the drum kit for about 18 months. And when I listen to it now, I think, wow, he had really nailed it in a very short time. Obviously a natural, and an instinctive player against my playing as well, which was a big part of it for me back then. But at the time we went in the studio to record one of these days for the single, we were still playing covers. Thin Lizzy, Skinnerd, Bad Company, all that kind of stuff, Purple, doing covers. And like one of these days would be in the set with all these Thin Lizzy covers, Emerald and Warriors and Bad Reputation and all that kind of stuff. So we were, and what started to happen was people got as interested in the original stuff as they were in the covers. Who was that song by you did? They would say, assuming it was a cover, you see. And I say, well, it's our song. Was it? They went, because our original music was holding its own against the covers in the set. And that's when I knew, I felt like, well, there's something here, And it was really when we recorded the single and it got picked up by the Soundhouse in London, and they played it to death. And then Tommy Vance played it, John Peel played it, and it was an interesting time because of the punk crossover thing, because there were a lot of small labels had come up to get the music of these sort of obscure bands where the major record labels didn't really know what to do, and they managed to get their records out on these, and we kind of did that as well. But unfortunately, I think we were probably too singles orientated and should have done an album straight away. If we had, everything would have been different. I really do believe that if we'd had an album in the can, a major record company may well have taken that album and released it as it was, or maybe polished it up a little and released it. But yeah, we were thinking too small, too gradual. You had to go for it back then.
I was thinking that because the single you're talking about is the Bright Light single, right? And I was always wondering, why wasn't there a follow-up? Right?
I think one of the things that really affected us was my father died very suddenly in 1982, and we were still going at that time, and had some new material planned, but it just knocked the wind out of us. I think heavy metal started to sort of fold slightly in '82. I know there are bands who formed after that who say they're part of it, but it wasn't really. It was from 79 to 82 for me is when the important time was.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad passing away like that really affected us, obviously, and we took a break and we didn't really start playing together again until '84.
Mm-hmm.
But we did reform as Trespass, but I feel and then for one reason or another, we just ended up not doing it quite the way we had before, and then it ended up being Blue Blood, which is another thing altogether, But I really do believe that if we had done an album's worth of material in 1980, history would have been different. I'm not saying we would have made it or anything like that, or been a bigger band, but that would have satisfied me more than I feel like the industry came in and kind of took over a little bit, and I had the reins pulled out of my hands a bit. And to make a comparison with the new album, I very much had my hands on the reins for that. It's what I wanted it to be as much as possible, because I think you've got to stand or fall on that. And Trespass got a little bit knocked off the rails by the industry in with the whole Metal for Mothers thing, and then later on we lost our way a little bit. And when that happens, and you lose your consistency, and it was such a short window to get the band out there, and we messed it up basically.
But in the 90s, you actually released a compilation, The Works. Who initiated that release?
I think there was there was just some interest from, especially from Japan, in the stuff, and I was a bit surprised at first. It's funny really, but I think it comes back to the footprints in the rock theme. It's just something that it refuses to die. This music, not just Trespass, but I mean, I would never have believed in '75 when I first got into heavy rock music when I was 16. I would never have believed that Deep Purple would still be going now and pulling the audiences they do. When in '75, for me, Deep Purple were already a band of the past. The idea of 75-year-old rock stars just didn't exist back then, did it?
Oh,
You know, because the 75-year-olds were Vera Lynn and Max Bygraves and singers from the war. You know, I mean, when in '75, a whole new thing has happened to rock and roll. It's aged, but it's refused to die. It won't die. It's indestructible. It's immortal. It will not die.
really
And
is.
and of course, there's an element to that the I suppose the music industry don't really want that. They want to bring somebody up, some new young star, get everything out of them they can, and then discard them and bring up another one. But you can't do that with heavy rock because the fans are loyal, and
Yeah,
they will stick with you, you know, and that's wonderful.
it is wonderful. But by 1993, you actually put out an album, Head. Tell me about that record and the times in which it came out.
Yeah, well, yeah, I started to write this stuff. We worked on it together, me and my brother, and we I don't know. I was obviously Metallica played quite a big part in our existence because they those two of the guys used to be in our fan club back in the very early days, and Lars used to write to us quite a lot. And I remember his letters were always like 2 or 3 pages thick, you know, because he wanted to know all this stuff, and he's very kindly said that we had not a relatively big influence on them, not just the music either. He liked the new wave of heavy metal because, you know, bands just did it. They just put a record out. If they wanted to put a record out, that's what they did. They didn't wait for a record label to come and say sign here. They just did it, and he liked that. And I think Metallica had that kind of attitude too. They just wanted to play their music, and so anyway, so that kind of style of music influenced me a lot. And then the whole kind, some of the grunge bands, like Alice in Chains, especially, and I had this new kind of set of sounds that I wanted to work with. But also, it's quite a dark sounding album. It is quite dark. We were coming out of the period of doing the Blue Blood stuff, which was all very light and a bit on the bit more melodic AOR kind of stuff. I guess I just had some stuff to get out of my system, and it came out a bit black and a bit dark and a bit heavy. Not complete. There's some nice Trespassy elements in there, and some of the songs I really quite like, and they may appear in a live set at some point. I don't know, but then it was a bit of a departure really from. I guess people were expecting something. It got some quite nice reviews from some good journalists, but I think we missed a trick there, because I think if we'd been a bit more relaxed and allowed a bit more brightness into our writing, I think it would have been better for Trespass.
Um, Tell me about the Metal Crusade shows in Japan in 1999, which kind of like a little album, live album available.
Yeah, that was just such. Oh, it was so fantastic. I mean, I love Japanese culture and the way they are, their arts, and everything about it really. And so what happened was a good friend of ours called a guy called Jeff Gillespie um, started to have this idea of bringing these new wave of British heavy metal bands to Japan to do this one-off concert. And of course there was Tank and Samson, good old Paul, God rest his soul, and Praying Mantis, and a few others. And it was just fantastic. They looked after us so wonderfully well. And up until that point, I'd never signed that many autographs. But we went there in October, and it was really hot still in Tokyo. It was just a wonderful experience. And I think you can hear it in the recording that I'm really happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really happy that day, and I wanted to do more. It was wonderful.
Well, you did follow through with two more compilations, Works 2 and the anthology that came out like an early.
Yeah, yeah. The anthology was a bit of a strange one. I mean, that has some really obscure stuff on it. Um, I am toying with the idea of something more, maybe possibly on vinyl. I've been talking to a few people about the possibility of doing that, and so I might do something, a real collector's piece, something for the aficionados. But that's in its infancy at the moment. But it depends how well the album, because it's one of those things. I mean, you can imagine that when you've got a new album and you're forging ahead with some new music, if you bring out your old music, and it can kind of overshadow it a little bit. I want them to sort of work together and complement each other as much as possible. I mean, I don't know what you think, but a few people have said to me that this album has the sound of the old days in it, and I was surprised when people said that to me. But I suppose that's because I literally did pretty much exactly what I wanted to do, and it comes out of me. It's so I guess it's nice that people can hear that link. I mean,
I
there's been a lot of musical water under the bridge since 1980, hasn't there? And it's hard not to be influenced by some of the things that have happened in that time. But I've very much got my own palette now that I work with. I know my paint box, my musical paint box, if you like. I don't stray too far from what I know, what I feel is right.
and in many ways, this new album could be your defining moment, I think.
I think that's possibly true. I'd be very proud if people thought that, because I'm proud of it, and it is something that I wanted to. I guess one of the things is that because we didn't get to make that album is one of the reasons why I haven't been able to put the pen down, because I'm still perhaps trying to say. I mean, it's like anything, isn't it? The bands make a lot of albums. Some bands make an album every year. They've got 20 albums, 40 albums. I mean, how much of that material never gets played again? There's a lot of material gets discarded, isn't it? they pick a few tracks to play live from an album, but a lot of it just gets discarded somehow, and then
Uh,
you end up you end up playing for 4 hours because you can't fit it all in. You know, it must be hard. I mean, like Maiden are an example of that. How they managed to choose what to play, I don't know, but
yeah, I can imagine that. Now, are you in control of all of your recordings at this point?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously the newer stuff is on, you know, we're signed to the label, but in terms of the old stuff, yeah, yeah. It's just
Uh,
deciding what to do, you know.
Now, despite all of those downtimes that you had here and there, you always went back to the music. What kept you going back?
It's really important to me. It's really a part of my ability to communicate, I think. I it's like it's a. I mean, there must be lots of people out there who have got an artistic. What actually happened was I had a long break, and then I wrote 3 songs. One of which we did work up as a possibility to go on Wolf, but it didn't make it in the end. And I was working with a friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, is this going to be Trespass material?" I said, "Oh, no, no, no." I said, "You know, I want to do something new, blah blah blah." And he said, "You're crazy." He said, "You've got a name. You've got something that a lot of people would love to have. You've got a name. You've got something you can put on your music, and then that will make people listen to it, or you know, if you're lucky." And I thought about it for a while, and I guess that was what made me think, well, yeah, well, maybe there's something in what he says, you know. But it has to be, for it to be Trespass, it has to be true. I can't write any old thing. It has to be true to Trespass, to what to my concept of what it is.
Definitely. I mean, you got a brand. Finally, when it's all over and done with, how would you like to be remembered?
I liked I one of the things that in 1980 my brother went down to the Sound House, and he said they put one of these days on. He said everybody got their air guitars out. He said and waited for played along with the intro and waited for that drum roll when the band kicks in with the riff. He said he said it was just absolutely amazing. You know I think the joy that brings. I mean, you know, music is such an emotional thing. So yeah, I'd like to be remembered for that, for the feeling those guys had when the riff comes in. It's a little bit like the heavy part in Bohemian Rhapsody when the guys are in the car, you know.
Yes.
But it moves you. It moves people. It's a weird thing. I mean, I guess it must be something really inherent in human beings. That rhythmical thing, that connection with the music. It goes, you know, through all cultures and everything. Yeah, yeah. The music, I guess, it's quite a thought to think. You know, 50, even 100 years from now, somebody somewhere in the world might be listening to one of my songs. I mean, I'll be long gone, obviously, but that's quite a big thing to have made even the smallest footprint in the rock is a big deal.
Um, that's absolutely great because that's kind of how I feel about my interviews. I really don't care how many people see it, as long as the right people see it. And I think probably the biggest reward for me would be years from now when I'm not doing this and you're not doing it, and some kid discovers Trespass and he comes across this interview and it does it for him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how fantastic is that?
Yeah,
And
that's
and,
that's that's my aim.
yeah, and I guess you know it's layer upon layer upon layer. I mean, you can't. There wouldn't be a Trespass if there hadn't been a Deep Purple and a Bad Company and a Free and a Wishbone Ash and all the other bands that. And my brother was the American bands, Journey and Boston and Foreigner and all sorts of, and all that Kiss, all that came together in a big melting pot, like a load of witches, you know. We made a spell.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, mate. I'm off to an open mic night now to do a Gary Moore set. How about that?